Well, welcome to the 700 Club and welcome to the new year, because the FBI is now searching for additional suspects in the New Year's Day terror attack in New Orleans. The early morning rampage took the lives of 15 people, including a young single mother.
Federal agents are also looking into whether the explosion of a Tesla Cybertruck outside the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas is connected. CBN's Lori Johnson reports.
The FBI is asking for the public's help to find anyone who was involved with the man who drove a rented pickup truck through a crowd of New Year's Eve revelers. The truck, traveling at a high rate of speed and carrying the ISIS flag, barreled down Canal and Bourbon Streets at 3:15 a.m.
We have dozens of people that got hit by this car.
The suspect was wearing body armor and firing an AR-style rifle out of the truck, leaving 3 blocks of carnage, killing 15 people and injuring dozens more.
We ran one way, so like about 5 feet away from the curb, and we ran into the bar to be protected by the little divot.
He then crashed the truck, stepped out, and opened fire, wounding 2 police officers before being shot and killed. He's identified as 42-year-old Samsud Dim Jabbar, a U.S.-born citizen and Army veteran who lived in Houston, Texas.
The FBI also reported to me that mere hours before the attack, he posted videos on social media indicating that he was inspired by ISIS, expressing a desire to kill.
Police found multiple homemade pipe bombs packed with nails inside the truck. They also found other explosive devices in the city. A fire at an Airbnb near Bourbon Street yesterday morning is now reportedly being linked to Jabbar. Officials say it appears explosive devices associated with the attack were made at the property.
Those people who don't believe in objective evil, all you have to do is look at what happened in our city early this morning.
Officials say the normal steel barricades were not in place because they were being replaced in time for the Super Bowl next month. Vehicles were placed as blockades, but there were gaps.
We had barriers there, we had officers there, and they still got around. So we did indeed have a plan, but the terrorists defeated it.
City officials say the new barriers should have been there.
This construction should have happened much earlier, and everything really should have been ready and in place, fixed, repaired, ready to go now.
Much of the revelers were in town for college football's Sugar Bowl, scheduled for last night. Officials postponed the game until later today. Meanwhile, 600 miles to the west, investigators are questioning whether a deadly blast in Las Vegas is linked to the New Orleans attack. A Tesla Cybertruck exploded in front of the Trump Hotel, killing the driver and injuring 7 others. The bed of the truck was filled with gas canisters, camping fuel, and fireworks. The same app was used to rent both the Las Vegas and the New Orleans vehicles. Officials are treating it as a possible act of terrorism. We're also learning that they disrupted an alleged plot against an influential Jewish group in the days before Hanukkah. A Florida man is in custody and allegedly intended to carry out a shooting attack against the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Well, CBN senior international correspondent Gary Lane, he spent decades reporting on radical Islam. He joins us now for more on this story. So, Gary, this suspect, born and raised in the United States, and yet he's inspired by ISIS. What do we know about how he was radicalized?
Well, that's what the FBI is trying to figure out, Gordon. He was an IT specialist in the U.S. Army for 8 years, so he probably was online a lot. Was he radicalized online? Also, he spent a year in Afghanistan, serving in the Army in Afghanistan. So was he radicalized there? Did he come in contact with militant Muslims while he was in Afghanistan? Or was it just what he saw occurring with the war and the death and being in an Islamic country? Did all of that influence him? So we don't know. The FBI is still trying to figure that out.
Was he born to a Muslim family?
No, he converted to Islam. Now, what isn't clear right now is when he converted. Some of his friends say he converted. The FBI isn't saying when that occurred. Did it occur after he was in Afghanistan? Did it occur before he went to Afghanistan? We don't know yet.
Well, ISIS encourages people to use vehicles as weapons. Was New Orleans unprepared, or, can anyone prepare for this kind of attack?
Well, I don't think they expected this, and they had a problem with bollards. These metal barriers that they set up weren't functioning properly. All their attention, Gordon, was on the upcoming Super Bowl. That was the security effort. The concentration was on security for that. I don't think they expected that someone was going to drive a truck through New Year's Eve revelers there in the French Quarter. And one other problem they had, they only had one police car, one vehicle blocking access to Bourbon Street. And they should have had a whole series of vehicles there blocking access, and maybe even some concrete barriers if these bollards weren't working. And what he did, the terrorist just drove right around the police vehicle and up on a sidewalk, and that's how he got access to do what he did.
Well, what's your take on the Cybertruck attack, of the explosion? Obviously, Elon Musk is involved because it was one of his trucks, and then it was right in front of the Trump Hotel. So what's your take on this?
Well, that is obvious, isn't it? I mean, Elon Musk, Tesla, why was he driving a Tesla? Why did it go off in front of the bomb go off in front of a Trump hotel? There is a definite message there. And then here's a possible connection to the New Orleans attack. Both vehicles were rented from the same company, the Turo company. They have an app, you can rent vehicles. Why were they both rented from the same company? What are the chances of that, Gordon? So the FBI has a lot to look into.
Well, the FBI has also been warning of other attacks for months. Are we dealing with both of these attacks seem to be homegrown? But are we dealing with sleeper cells in the U.S.? And how does our border policy play into it?
Well, we don't know for certain if they are homegrown. I mean, there may have been influence from Iran or from ISIS. Think about it. Iran wants to kill Donald Trump. Iran wants to cause mayhem also in the United States because they see what's coming with a Trump presidency, very much anti-Iran, and their economy is not in good shape. So was it Iran? Maybe the ISIS flag was just a diversion. We don't know all that yet. But we do know that over 375 people on the terrorism watch list have been apprehended in the last 4 years coming over our southern border. We also know back in June, there were 150 people, part of an ISIS smuggling network, that were arrested and apprehended by the FBI, and 50 of them, the FBI doesn't know what happened to them, where they went. They were part of maybe 300 or 400 people that were smuggled in, part of this network. In addition to that, last June, there were 5 Tajiks, people from Tajikistan, who definitely were affiliated with ISIS, that were apprehended, arrested in L.A., in Philadelphia, and New York. So we know they're here. How many have gotten through that haven't been arrested and apprehended? The FBI admits that there are some, probably in sleeper cells, others that we don't know about, that are active in the United States that could be activated at any time to cause more mayhem and chaos.
Well, there seems to be a rise in I guess, ISIS, which is amazing to me. When you look at the history of it, it formed in northern Iraq after President Obama fulfilled a campaign pledge to pull American troops out. So in that power vacuum, this guy says, I'm a direct descendant of the prophet, and I'm announcing a new caliphate. And if you're a dedicated Muslim, observant, you have to rally to my flag. And so a lot of people did. And he came from nowhere and formed a pretty powerful fighting force that we're still dealing with today. So why is that ideology now spreading? It's amazing to me to see an ISIS flag on a truck in New Orleans. What are we doing to fight the ideology?
Gordon, look, I think the big mistake is many people thought when Donald Trump and American forces, along with the Kurds, defeated the caliphate in Syria, that ISIS was defeated, ISIS was gone. But all you did was spread them around the world. They're very active in Africa right now, also in parts of South Asia. So what are we doing? They've been active in Syria. And in December, we had multiple airstrikes against ISIS positions in Syria to stop them from reforming and becoming a threat. The United States bombed some of their terrorist training camps, other locations. And just before Christmas, they killed the leader, the ISIS leader in Syria. So the U.S. has been very active in that sense. But what are we doing to tamper down this whole radical Islamic ideology? I don't see that we're doing much of anything. Do you?
I don't, and I've said it for years, that if we think bullets are going to solve this problem, we need to think again, because the ideology seems to survive. The founder of ISIS, who claimed he was a direct descendant, he's been dead now for years. And so every one of his replacements has been killed. It's kind of like looking at Hamas. How is Hamas going to survive now? How is Hezbollah going to survive? And the answer seems to be there are plenty of willing people to step up and go into those leadership positions and keep that ideology going. I'm a Christian, and so I approach these problems from a spiritual point of view. There seems to be very definitely an evil here that survives any personality or any individual and seems to want to replicate. And it is out to kill and to steal and to destroy. Well, Gary, thanks for the insight, and thanks so much for joining with us.
Gordon, we need to be praying.
We do.
A lot. Yeah.
Well, in other news, Hamas is changing its position in the hostage negotiations yet again. This comes as a new report details the abuse hostages have suffered at the hands of the terror group. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl reports.
Israel's health ministry submitted a report to the United Nations this week documenting the testimony that comes from former hostages about the physical, sexual, and psychological abuse they suffered in Gaza. Women, men, and children say the abuse included beatings, isolation, deprivation of food and water, branding, hair pulling, and sexual assault. Natan Sharansky, who spent 9 years in Soviet prison for spreading the truth about human rights abuses in the former Soviet Union, told CBN News the report exposes the hypocrisy in the world's thinking.
Women's organizations who are not ready to accept that if rapists are from the oppressed and the raped women are oppressors, then it's not a crime in their eyes.
Sharansky says the report is hard to read.
It can remind people why our struggle is so justified and why we are not ready to stop the struggle as long as our hostages are in their hands and as long as our security is not guaranteed.
In the negotiations to free the remaining hostages, Hamas is demanding a week-long ceasefire and several days into it says it will release a partial list of hostages still in Gaza. Israel's defense minister threatens more war if Hamas doesn't start freeing hostages soon.
The IDF will intensify and strengthen its activities against the nests of terrorism in Gaza until the hostages are released and Hamas is eliminated.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
We need to stand with Israel and stand until these hostages come home. And I remind everyone, there are Americans in the hostages. That doesn't seem to be reported widely, but there are American citizens in those tunnels in Gaza. And it's truly amazing to me that our government hasn't taken a stronger stand. We need to take that stand to say, no, this is absolute evil. There is no legitimacy to their claims that somehow Israel was oppressing them. There were no IDF soldiers in Gaza before October 7th, none at all. Gaza was left to govern itself. That was all engineered by the Bush administration. All the way back in 2006, they had free elections, and the expectation was if you introduce liberty and freedom and democracy, people will vote for freedom, and they want to have their children, their grandchildren prosper. All of that was turned on its head when they elected Hamas to lead them. The first thing Hamas did, they executed all the leaders of Fatah. They took them to the top of buildings and threw them over. and killed them. That's how they executed their political opponents. And then they canceled elections. That no, not anymore. We're going to run this place. What did they do with all the international aid? Well, they put it in rockets, into guns, into tunnels. None of it went to the people of Gaza. None of it went to those citizens. Before October 7th, there was a survey from Stanford University that showed massive food insecurity. That means hunger in Gaza, all before October 7th. So to blame humanitarian crisis on Israel, to blame Israel for this, Israel's the victim of what Hamas has done. And we need to stand with Israel until this horror is finally over. Hamas is defeated forever, never allowed to reemerge from any tunnel anywhere, rearm, do anything. No more. And I applaud the incoming president for saying, if they're still there, you can expect something to be unleashed that you have no idea. Let's see that come to pass, that we finally have our citizens come home.